is this recording?
Dun dun da da dun dun da da dun dun da da dun dun da da yee yee da da. Are we legally able to actually even sing that?
I don't think we're legally allowed to sing most of the songs.
Well, we're not making money, so I don't think we'll get in trouble.
Yeah, they can't sue us because we have nothing to give. That's how it works.
HBO,
That's how it works.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can't get sued unless there's something to gain, and there's nothing to gain from suing
Pories. You can't sue us. We're pories.
Yeah, HBO is gonna come for our ass.
They're gonna be like, only we are allowed to use that.
And I'm like, but I wrote it, and they're like,
we just need to do a cover. If it's a cover, you're allowed to do it. So if you need to like replace the words.
Get my guitar.
Yes. And by words, I mean we need
bling, 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 bling,
boop,
bling,
like get like an extra note. They're like, doesn't count.
YouTube can't give us a copyright strike because they don't recognize it.
Yeah, I've seen Vanilla Ice. I know what he did to that song. He copied it.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the After School Special Club podcast. I'm Chris.
I am Mary, the other host.
And we're excited for you guys to listen to us.
Yeah, and this is another setup that we're doing in the interim of us having our studio set up.
Yeah.
So you're just gonna keep seeing us travel around a bit till we figure it out.
It should honestly just become a bit.
Yeah, it should be.
It wouldn't be original because when I used to watch Couch Hop before they ended, they would do that with their podcast. It was filmed on location somewhere different every time.
Yeah.
But you know what? We work with what we have, which is nothing.
Yes, and we're not lying. We do have a setup that we're gonna work on.
Or do we?
No, we're lying to them. That's how we gain trust, is by lying to people. That's the only way I know how to do it.
Yeah, no, we do have, like I mentioned in the last episode, I have a spare room. We're just working on getting some furniture, blackout curtains, sound foam, all that stuff. So we need some time. We need time.
Give us patience. And your money.
And your moolah.
Just kidding. Just give us your time. That's more important than money.
And you heard it here, folks. Nuggets of knowledge and wisdom from Mary.
So we are going to jump into some topics today, specifically things that we looked at, things that we played recently.
What?
Yeah.
We play games?
We do play games sometimes.
Believe it or not, the controller on the thumbnail is not a facade. We do play games.
We actually, yeah. I mean, I've played one once. So the game that I played once was Road 96.
That's the only game I've played too.
Look at this.
You want to talk about it?
Uniting. I guess.
So yeah, Mary and I recently both just played Road 96. I have beat it. Mary is pretty close.
I'm almost at the end, which is a lot of games. I'm almost at the end, but this one I'm going to finish because I love it.
So yeah, we thought we would share our like thoughts on it so far. I beat it, but I have not completed every single person's story 100%, and I'm also missing one of the perks. I think it's the work visa.
Yes.
So I may go back at some point when I have time, which I always say, to try and beat it. But yeah, well, because also since I got my PS5, I downloaded like so many games because I was like, I've been wanting to play these, and I'm like, fuck.
Yeah, and now it's there. Yeah. So we both got it for the Switch. I know it released on the PC too, right? Is it like PC and Switch?
I think so.
Yeah.
Obviously, as I've mentioned before, don't really use my gaming PC, or my laptop, so I did play it on Switch as well.
Yeah. And I feel like for me, like Road 96 on the Switch is great because you can take it anywhere, just on the road. You can take Road 96 on the road with you.
It's a match made in heaven.
It is.
So we just kind of wanted to talk about some of the pros and cons, the things that we liked about it, the things that we maybe didn't like as much, and who our favorite characters are.
And who our least favorite characters are. The no characters.
So one of the things that I'll start off with right off the bat, kind of in line with the pros. So since I've beaten it, there is a new game plus option, which I think is great. We love a new game plus option. I've always loved that idea. I think it's great to give players the opportunity to go back with everything that they finished the game with, especially if you're a fan of story. Like, I've always admired games that had a great story that I've wanted to play again that give you a new game plus option, because sometimes, you go through all the grunt work, right? And you don't always want to do that again. You just want to experience the story. So
Yeah, especially with items too. It's like some items you've already gotten the excitement is lost once you get it again. So like it's
Right.
nice for a new game plus, you already have everything, but then you can actually focus on getting the stuff that you missed out on or the things that you want to get, like the tapes
Right.
in this game you can collect for the music that people can give you, the characters. And I know there's a lot like on the list, like I could see all the empty slots, you know?
Right.
So
And I somehow managed to get all of the tapes on my first run, which I'm happy about because that's just less that I have to go back and collect later.
you're a real music man.
Yeah, I mean, really all that I have to do if I do a new game plus would be get the government ID. And then I think I had 3 characters whose stories I didn't complete 100%. Because I got Zoe to 100%, John to 100%, and I want to say maybe like Alex to 100%. I don't remember, but I think it was either I had 3 100% and 4 not 100% or something like that. So there's stuff for me to go back and do, which definitely the new game plus makes it a little more inviting because I don't have to go through the trouble of getting everything again.
Yeah, and I'm excited to actually like go through it. I don't think I'm going to get all the tapes, but maybe on the new game plus I'll be able to do that. Because there's some dialogue options that I really messed up the first time.
Yeah. So yeah, New Game Plus was something that I think was really great. And then in terms of just like the overall appearance of the game, I think Mary and I were pretty much agreed. Like, just we really loved the style of it.
Yeah, it was when I saw the trailers for it or like the teaser trailers for it at the award show. I was like, this game I'm interested in because I love cell shading and I love good music choices, and like it has such great music. It just puts you in the mood.
Yeah.
You know, and I love it when games can do that. So I was definitely invested in it before I bought it. And then I honestly forgot that it came out because there's so many games that are coming out like all around the same time now, to where I was like, oh yeah, I was really excited about the game. And I bought it immediately and I started playing it. And I was like, yeah.
I know I was in the same boat, like, because it came out while I was still on vacation. So like, and I didn't bring my Switch with me. So I was like, well, but I really only remembered because of watching like, there's a couple people who I watch stream every now and again. And like, I think one of them streamed it or like played it or something. And I was just like, oh yeah, I completely forgot.
Yeah.
It just kind of bombed. It did not bomb. It dropped a bomb on my life because I really enjoyed it.
And then it made me explode.
Yeah, definitely. I really loved the music as well. I do like that you can play the tapes, here and there. It's nice to kind of have that option. I've probably mentioned it before, but like music is a huge thing for me when I'm playing games. It's one of the first things that I notice. And I definitely liked the atmosphere that the music added to it. I think it definitely did just kind of have that, like, some of the songs give you that like feel good, like I'm just like out on the road, like doing my thing.
Yeah, it gave personality to it. It's like you got to choose what music you wanted to listen to. Every opportunity I had when I was in a car, either stealing it or I just, mostly stealing it. I'm a thief of cars in this game, but I would always like pop in the music and I would like switch it around. And, when characters, I think there was one point where the two like thieves, I forget their names right now.
Oh, Stan and Mitch.
Yes. When they were in the car with you and they do that pseudo game show.
Oh, yeah.
They're like, put on some music or whatever. And then you put on the music and then it's like, bah, bah, bah. It's not like that. It's much better. But
speaking of that, actually, it's not in our show notes, but I was going to ask you, what did you think about like all the mini games?
I really liked them. I thought it put the pressure on in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
With most games, like when you have a short amount of time to answer questions or have dialogue choices, I feel like adding on that pressure makes you more invested in what you're doing. It makes you more invested as a player into the choices that you make. So I really liked them. I thought they were fun. They were easy.
Yeah.
I would say they were really easy. They're not difficult. And you kind of know what the game wants you to answer.
Mm-hmm.
Or because there's this whole political thing with the game.
Right.
It's like if you're leaning like more to the right, more to the left, more in the middle, And the game definitely feeds you information to be like, your choice in this matters.
Right.
And you make an effect on the world around you by these choices.
Right.
So I think the mini games added to that with every choice that you make. So I thought they were really cool. I liked them. Yeah,
I was actually kind of surprised because I'm not, I don't usually like mini games in like in a larger story. Like I know you like playing Blitzball and Final Fantasy X.
I got invested.
The second that you don't, like, there's one part in the storyline where you have to, and I did not like that.
They're like, you must play.
And then I never played Blitzball again. Like, even like when you can just somehow teleport from a save point to a blitzball stadium. I would never do it. I'm like, why would I do this?
Yeah, I actually, speaking of Final 10 and blitzball, like there are some games, including that, where I played it for the first time and I was like, I hate this mini game. I was like, I'm not going back to it. It's a waste of my time. I want to do the other stuff. I want to invest myself with grinding or leveling up or doing those things as opposed to that. But then I think it was maybe the third or fourth playthrough of it. I was like, I wanted more to the game. I wanted more from it than what I had. So that's why I went with blitzball. I was like, I haven't really explored this part of the game yet. I want to explore it. And then I got really invested in it. It was like fantasy football. I was like rostering everybody. I'm like, you.
Then, I have the best team.
And then I had everyone from, the Besaid Aurochs were like bad, the no-no players.
Right.
And then the Luca Goers. That was like the famous good players. I had all the Luca Goers. I got all of them. It was me. And I think I had maybe Owaka and then Luca Goers and then Titus. It's like, they are the best. I must have the best. It's like having the Patriots.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. Luckily, I didn't feel that way about Road 96. I actually enjoyed the mini games. Like Mary said, they were pretty easy, but I actually thought that they were fun. Because I think that's the thing is a lot of times with mini games, I don't find them fun. And like it detracts from my experience because they feel like a chore. Because a lot of times too, when they're like, especially when mini games are incorporated into the story and you are forced to play them, I think if you're going to have players be required to play a mini game, I think it should be engaging because you don't want it to be like, hey, here's a thing you have to do and it sucks.
Yeah, and they're very short.
Yeah.
Like they're not long. Like the mini games are indeed mini. Like you don't need to do the same mini game throughout the whole entire game. Like they change it up.
Right.
And I think that's what makes it more fun is like it's not the same thing. Like they are different and they have different choices and different options. And that's why I feel like they did a really good job with it. Yeah, I really did enjoy them.
What was your favorite one that you've done so far?
Probably the game show, like where the two, I keep forgetting their names, the thieving friends, when they were like, oh, are you going to be in our group? Or like they were trying to split up. They were like in the middle of a breakup and you were trying to convince them not to break up with each other. And they're like, why don't you go with him? Why don't you have him be your thief instead of me?
Right.
And then to answer questions to be like, is this person worth it to be in your thieving group?
Right.
And I was like,
I thought that was so creative.
Yeah,
I love that.
Very creative. And like it was like, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Like lights went down.
Yeah.
Like, the music went up. So
that
really
one.
cool.
Yeah. That one. And then, I don't know if you'll get it in your current playthrough, but there's one with Sonia in the limo where it's like, she's like super drunk. And then I don't know, like it's almost like you're on like an acid trip. Where it's like it just like fades away and you're like flying through like this like very like I don't know how to describe it, like vaporwave like neon like tunnel, and you have to, it's one of those things where it's like do you remember in Kingdom Hearts 2 in Atlantica where you had to like press the button when the circle closes in at the right moment?
Yeah, like a rhythm kind of game.
Yeah, it was like a rhythm thing like that. But like again, like it was fun because I was just like, wow, like what is happening, but also like really cool.
Yeah.
So I actually really admired the mini games. Especially because like when you consider it being like an indie developer, like they put the time into doing that, and like they could have put that somewhere else in the game. You know, it's not like they're a AAA studio and have like millions of people and millions of dollars. I mean, I don't know what their budget was, but I think it was cool that they put the time into that and like made them turn out well.
Yeah, it added to the story.
Yeah.
Like they added to the story. They didn't detract from it.
And then just like overall, for me, narrative progression, it's so challenging, I think, to make games like this. And again, especially for like an indie developer to have the bandwidth, I think, to design a game like this with the team that they had. Again, I don't know like what the size of their team is, but I know it's not a AAA studio. So I would imagine it's not tons and tons of people, tons and tons of writers.
It's not EA.
That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I feel like they did a really, really great job with just the narrative design of the game and having each sort of episode play out differently. How do your choices affect the storyline in that episode, but then overall, right? Because there are things that carry over episode to episode based on what you did as the prior kid. Because basically, for anyone who doesn't know, like the premise, you're like a kid running away, trying to escape to the border and get out of your country. And so each episode you play as a different kid. And And so the choices that you make in the prior playthrough still affect the next episode and the next kid that you play as. So I think that was really, really cool. And just to be able to pull it off in, I think, such a really well done way. Because again, that's something I know could be super, super challenging for writing in a game. And to have the whole game itself sort of hinge on that, I thought it was really well done.
Yeah, I was never bored.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that even if it's kind of repetitive, like the actual game is very repetitive, where you either get to the border, you either get across the border, or you don't get across the border, and then you start off with another kid trying to get to the border, trying to cross. And you know how it's going to happen. Like, you're going to either get there or get detained, or something's going to happen. You could die. Things could happen like that. And then you go right back to the main like screen, I guess, which is her show. And then she talks about the next kid that you get to pick. So you get to pick the next kid that you're going to be.
Which I thought that was a really creative way to choose who your next character was going to be.
Yeah.
Because there's always like at the start of each episode a clip from like the Sonia show, and she does like a missing kids report, and you have 3 kids to choose from, and you choose one, and that's the person you end up playing as in the next episode, which I thought was really, really cool.
Yeah, because it also like shows you where these kids are at right now. It's like their health bar, how much money they have, and you get to pick that.
Yeah.
I always picked the health over the money because I know you have to pick, them eventually, but I always did that just because I felt like there was more things that would require better health than financial gain.
Yes, and money I felt like was pretty easy to come by in most cases. Like, I feel like you didn't ever really, like, unless you had to, like, bribe someone, because I don't want to, like, give too much away. Like, unless you had to bribe someone, I don't remember ever having to spend, like, a huge amount of money to get out of a situation.
Yeah, because I always thought that, like, when I first started playing the game, I was like, you might have to just bribe someone at the end. And, like, maybe that was a playthrough that I haven't done yet because I haven't beaten the game, but for me, like, I found out, I was like, that is the better choice. Like, I just don't use money that much in this game.
Yeah, I never did. And like I got lock picking. So it's like I can, and like hacking. So it's like I was able to get into safes and like rooms where there were usually like $40 that I could just steal and like get away with.
Yeah. And I think the game, like, it just speaks volumes to, I think, a lot of people that, especially now, because there's a lot of like things going on in the world that you want to like escape or like get out, or like for a better world, for a better life. There's a lot of people that are realigning with that kind of mentality.
Right.
And I feel like this game does a really good job with like making you want to invest the time in getting out, and they make it so you are emotionally invested in whether these kids get across the border.
Right.
I thought that was really smart. With the progression, I feel like they did a really good job.
Yeah. And that kind of like dovetails into our last topic for the things that we liked about it, which was the political aspect of it. It is definitely a very political game. Regardless of how you feel about it, there's no way. Well, I was going to say there's no way to not be political, but you do have more neutral choices. But regardless, it's the nature of the game is political. It's about escaping a tyrannical country.
Yeah, and it's about like people that either are far on one side or far on the other side or far in between, where like they're so disconnected from it that they don't care what's going on.
Right.
Because they're like, nothing matters. It's either like you can pick those kind of situations, and that is what people usually fall into politically. It's like either they really believe something or they really believe the other thing, or they really believe that nothing matters.
Right.
And like you get to choose that and like branch in your own storyline that way, which I thought was really cool and also relatable. I felt like it, touched upon a lot of things that are going on right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's definitely very topical for our current political climate, at least here in the United States. So
yeah.
And I mean, and obviously in many, many other countries, where people are trying to get out and seek refuge elsewhere. So, yeah. So we now have our list of cons. Dun, 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 dun,
dun. Sorry if you were listening really closely and your ears are hurt now.
Yep. Get over it, loser.
Yeah.
This is how we irritate followers, right? We just insult them.
Like, we're like, jerk.
Jerk off.
Loser. Listen to it further away. Listen to it. I'm just kidding. But no, so the cons, definitely. There were some UI issues that we ran across, especially with, I know this happened to you because you told me also, but so you get these options like in the screen to like show you what you want to answer when the character asks you a question. So you get to pick from that. But you can also move at the same time.
Right.
So a lot of times you'll be moving around, walking around, the camera will be moving. And like I've accidentally clicked on the answer that I didn't want.
Right.
And it actually brought about like a decision that I didn't want to happen. And I lost out on the game direction that I wanted to go.
Right.
And it was just because of the placement of like the dialogue options and choices and the fact that you could like kind of careen off and accidentally hit something you weren't meaning to hit.
Yeah, that happened to me a couple times. The worst one though, spoiler alert, is for me was there is an option when you're trying to cross the border where you can bribe a cop, but if you don't have money or you like fuck it up, you end up having to run, and you're with another kid and you can climb over the wall, and the kid was on top and like he was gonna, I think, probably reach down to like pull me up, and you had to choose an option. And because of the nature of the scene, like, you know, it's like I'm running like from the police, and like, you know, it's the shaky camera and all that stuff. Like I ended up choosing the wrong option by accident, and I died. Like I got detained. And I was just like, okay, like I could have escaped, but, or maybe, I don't know if there was more beyond that point, but like, I was like, fuck, like it really fucked up my choices, especially that far. Cause like I had made it to the border. I was literally on the verge of escaping or like nearing escape. So I was just like,
yeah, and the game's not very forgiving. So it's like, once you make that choice, it's like, that's what you make. And like, there's no going back. So it's like, you've invested the time into actually thinking it through and being like, oh, this is the choice I want. And then it just kind of like, nope, this is what you want.
Right.
And it's, yeah.
So like, and so it's like, it's irritating, but I do admire it, because a lot of times, you know, in games you do get like locked into like a menu, or like, because there aren't really cutscenes a lot, right? It's a lot of like active, like you can move around during dialogue, and like,
yeah, there's like cutscenes going into each episode where like it has like a vignette and like you know, sets up the episode and like the title comes up, but yeah, that's about it for cutscenes.
Right. So it's like I do really like that. And certainly I know that designing a game in that way is very challenging for these reasons, where it's like I have agency. So it's like I could just completely like walk away from someone while they're waiting for me to choose an option. And that doesn't like affect the gameplay at all. You can always like come back and like choose your option. But like it definitely was frustrating in those instances where it like screwed up my storyline.
Yeah.
But that being said, I do prefer the like open, able to like move around and look around and like walk around while having options you have to choose from.
Gives you more time.
Yeah. You know, and because also like when you're playing a game, like sometimes it is frustrating to like, you know, be like minding your business, and then all of a sudden you like trigger, like you get locked into a scene or like an interaction, and you can't move around or like move away or finish what you were doing. So I did like that. I just wish that like it had been less easy to choose something wrong if you were like, if there was a lot of motion happening.
Yeah.
Because really, unless like you're in a situation where you can just like, okay, and like walk up and stop and like carefully choose your option. Because it's also not, you have to use the Joy-Con and a cursor, which I did not like. For that reason, I think it would have been better if it was like, okay, when you're looking at someone and you have options, you can use the D-pad to scroll and to choose. Because using the Joy-Con and having a cursor, that was what fucked me up, was like, because if the screen was moving a lot, the cursor, I couldn't track the cursor and I would choose the wrong thing by accident. Yeah,
and I think that's something like PC gamers probably are more familiar with that and like more comfortable with that as opposed to console players. I'm actually not too uncomfortable with that because of all my Nancy Drew playing. Because Nancy Drew is all dialogue and all dialogue choices, and the cursor is over there. So I was used to that, but I wasn't used to having motion with it and then messing up the choices. So that was definitely a con air.
So we also had wishing that there were just more options to progress the story and getting out of things other than, because Mary kind of alluded to it before, but there's, for the most part, you get 2 to 3 options. When you have 3, they're politically driven, so it'll have a little icon whether it's like left, right, or just like I guess like independent, like you're not like political.
Yeah, like I'm just not into politics.
Right.
Type of thing.
Otherwise, you usually, I think, only have like 2 options.
Yeah.
But you never have, and I kind of just mentioned this, like you never have the option to just like walk away and not do anything.
Yeah, like not answer like the ... like not
Right.
say anything. So yeah, and it definitely had a role to play at the end of the game, which I've heard about. No spoilers, but yeah, I think I was mainly kind of in the middle. Like the game was like trying to basically like say, okay, pick right or left. And then I was like, well, I don't really want to pick right or left or the middle. Like I kind of want to do something else, but
yeah,
limited to that.
Yeah. So there, and then just like other small things, like there were a couple things like clipping, animation errors, like.
Yeah, which is normal for especially like an indie developer to
Right.
have those kind of things.
And a game like this ambitious, again, like for an indie studio, I feel like this is a really big feat. So it's like, it's not surprising. And like, it wasn't anything that like detracted from my gameplay experience. It wasn't like a Cyberpunk situation.
Yeah, the game just didn't stop.
Yeah.
Like it just didn't like break every time you try to play it. Like yeah.
And there were some funny things. Like there's like a party sequence in one of this sequences with Sonya, where there's like a queue of people, and like this one was funny, but it was also kind of eerie because like there's like a queue of people waiting to get into like a show or something, and they, the characters all are just NPCs and they're just standing there. You can't interact with them, and like they had motion, like they have movement. They were just like waiting in line, and like I circled back, like I went to go and like get her wallet or whatever you have to do, and I came back past that line, and like everyone's animations had stopped. So it was like kind of eerie because it was just like a line of like 6 or 7 people just not moving.
It's like the Blair Witch Project.
Yeah, just frozen.
Yeah.
And like there's like tension in that episode, or like in that sequence of that episode, because there's like, somebody who you find out who it is later, like stalking her because they want to kill her. And so, and like he's there, so it's like that, and I was just like, man, this is creepy.
Yeah, it was very creepy. And he started yelling her name, like Sonya, where are you, Sonya? Yeah. Yeah, that was definitely creepy in itself. So with the glitch, it's just like an added creepiness, which actually like could be kind of cool, but that wasn't purposefully done. I don't think that was purposefully done.
Yeah, I was just like, hello, ma'am.
And then I think one of the last things, like kind of issues, not very big issues, but definitely something noticeable, is the end when you get to the border. It's primarily the same thing. Like even like different characters you play as, you always have to go through the same parts of the forest.
Yeah.
And there's a waterfall and like a little lake, and you always end up there.
Right.
And then you progress to whatever choice you make to get across the border.
Right.
But it always starts in that little lake area. And the first time playing through it, like the first character you got to that point, it was really cool because you could go out on the dock and there's like a little chair next to the lake, and you could play music, your cassette tape, put it in, and then just stare at the waterfall. It's like meditating.
It is. It's really nice.
It's like you went through all this drama, right? Trying to get there, like all these characters, all this crazy stuff happening. And then it's like a calm, like you're trying to like collect yourself in order to go to the border, collect yourself mentally to prepare yourself for it, which is cool. And I was like, wow, that's a really interesting way to do that. And then it's just like, you got to do that with every character, and it just kind of lost its like allure, like it lost its like oomph, you know?
And like I definitely like, I think I understand like their purpose in doing that, because again, like you said, it's supposed to be this like respite before before you're like, okay, I'm gonna cross the border or try to cross the border, and it's meant to be, okay, my final rest, like meditation, whatever. So I totally see the purpose, but I think where it got lost is it would be more purposeful if you as a player were not this omnipotent being, like because each episode, it's a different character that you're playing as. It's a different kid. And so sure, like if it were, actually like a different person, it's like if I went to this location and Mary went to this location, like that's different. But it's like, because you as a player are seeing each person go there each time, it kind of loses its effect because it's not novel anymore, because you're seeing the area through basically your own eyes as the player. Because again, there's no like cutscenes, like you play as different kids, but there's no like, hi, like this is me, this is my perspective. Like it's
lacking gratification.
Yeah.
Like, and I think, and I could talk about gratification at the end of it, because it's the whole crux is getting to the border,
right?
Crossing the border as a kid. And when you got to that point, and like when like one of my characters actually did cross, through one of the venues of doing that, like there wasn't a lot of gratification.
Right.
I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
That's cool.
Yeah, no, and that's definitely it. Like, I think just the repetitiveness of it being, and especially like being at the end where you're reaching the crux of the game, and this is like what you've been working towards. The border itself is the like right before the border is the same every time. So you're given different options on how you're going to try to escape. But the moments leading up to it, like after you leave the waterfall and you go to the next area, it's always the same. There's always like, there are different people hanging out there, but it's always like the same shop, the same people. They have the same dialogue options for each kid, which I was like, I think it would have been cool like if each kid you play as got different dialogue options from the shopkeepers.
Yeah, the shopkeepers, because they kept saying the same thing no matter what, and like you would ask different questions. So maybe one time I would ask one question, go back, ask another question, but they would give the same type of like conversation. They would even like turn the same way, and everything would happen the same way. And it's like, if they're seeing all these kids cross the border, it's like it would have been nice if they would have been like, oh, somebody just crossed this way, you know, or like talked about the character that you previously played as to like kind of continue on the story.
Like that would have been really cool.
Yeah. But it's a small thing. It's not a huge thing, but it is something that is noticeable, and I did notice it.
Yeah. Because I think like it is a small thing, but I think it kind of pulls you back because every episode is different as the kids, like, as you interact with the other 7 characters, like all the scenarios are different. And so you get to this point where you're expecting interactions to be different, but then they're not. They're the same every time. And so I feel like it pulled me from my immersion a little bit, because it's like, oh, like I'm playing as a different kid. I would expect different interactions from these people. And they even do that in the episodes themselves. There will be references to the previous kid that you played as and like what they did, because there are things like, depending on how your outcome escaping at the border is, people talk about that. Like I died the first time, or I got detained. No, I died. I got shot by the cops.
I don't know why I said
spicy. But and so then there are dialogue options, and there are things in the following episodes where you can ask people, oh, what do you think about like that kid who died at the border trying to cross?
Yeah, like bring it back to the player, bring it back to the player's choices instead of just carrying on.
Right.
Yeah.
So I did feel like the border part, especially like from the waterfall on, was very repetitive. I feel like the magic of it was kind of lost because it didn't change kid to kid as you play through. Yeah,
and the only like time where I felt like it did do that was you could like graffiti on the walls going into the like shopkeeper area, like,
and the way you get to the waterfall is different every time.
Yeah, like,
but
different.
It's still like you get there and then you get to the border, and that's pretty much the same.
Yeah, and I think it was cool how you got to like, because you can graffiti as each kid on the wall, like your political leaning. You can either lean to the right or the left or in the middle, like for yourself. And like I did the option where I was like, it's only me. You can only trust yourself. Like, don't trust anybody. Like, yeah. And so you graffiti like a dove with like a target on its heart.
Yeah, like a crosshair.
Yes. And I was like, that's cool. But I didn't really think about it. And then later in the week, I was just happening to look up on Wikipedia. You know, you're on YouTube, you just go down the spiral and you just start looking up random stuff. And you're like, I never knew that. And I was looking at Banksy, and I was watching a documentary about Banksy. And that's one of his like artworks.
Yeah, like street art.
Yeah. And I was like, that's cool. Because that is his political leaning, I feel like. Like he's trying to be like, you know. And I think that was cool to introduce something from real life into the game. Right. And I didn't know it at the time, but then I went back and I was like, that's actually really cool.
Actually,
it's really cool.
So yeah, that was pretty much our short list of cons and stuff. So we'll kind of close it out by talking about who our favorite characters were.
Yeah. I loved John.
Yeah.
John was my favorite. He gave a sort of like comfort, even when you first met him, like I think the first episode he was in for me.
Yeah.
Like he just brought about comfort. He was very comforting and he was very understanding.
Because I don't know if I guess we'll find out now, if all of if the first episode always starts the same, but I also had John as my first character, but like what was your interaction with him?
So was that like a a restaurant or like a bar or something.
Oh,
and
interesting.
then, like,
that was your first one.
and then like Alex was having difficulties
Mm-hmm.
and like he was trying to convince him to get out of this relationship that Alex had with this person that was dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess Alex was building a bomb or something.
Mm-hmm.
And John was like trying to not let him do that, like to convince him to stop doing that.
Yeah.
And then he was like, "Can you talk to him?" I was like, "Whatever."
You're like, I don't know.
I was like, "I don't know who you are, and I don't know where I am."
What's up?
I'm like, "Don't build that bomb."
Yeah.
Like that's my advice. Like, don't do it.
That's so funny because, okay, so that's really cool because mine did not start off that way.
Oh,
I had a
interesting.
different sequence. I had that sequence though, but later.
Oh, that's interesting.
So my first sequence in the first episode was with John, but I started off on walking on the side of the road. And so then like I was kind of like exploring, and then like I heard somebody. So I was like trying to find them, and then it's John, but he's like shit faced. He's like drunk.
So I wonder if like my first meeting with him is like this father type, like protective
Right.
angel, like trying to save people, and then like your interpretation of him at first, like it's very conflicting. Like
Right.
that's why I felt like comforted by him when I first saw him, because he was the first character where I was like, oh,
Yeah.
he sees me, he
Right.
sees people, he cares, like he truly cares about people.
Yeah. Mine was just he was drunk and we played soccer. Like
mean,
I had
that's pretty
immediately had a
comforting.
mini game.
I mean, that's fun.
Yeah, no, and the thing is though, I still got the comforting thing because it ends like it ends like that sequence ends like with a very like touching, like just like pensive, like we're sitting on a cliffside looking at the sun, like just kind of, it was like a nice start because I was like, oh, like this guy's like cool, like, and I didn't know because again it was the first like 5 minutes of the game. I was like, I didn't know like if this was gonna be, I didn't know he would be the main character, and then he was, and I was like, yay.
Yeah.
Because John was also my number one.
Number one.
Yeah, I felt like just I feel like he was just very like real, and just very like fatherly and loving. And
Yeah.
I felt very comforted as well.
Yeah, I seek those kind of people out in my life, I feel like.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I really liked him. I mean, there were some characters that if you try to seek, like, you don't want to seek them out. Like, not good people, but.
So him, and then my second was Fanny, actually, the cop, which I didn't like. Which kind of surprised me because my first, I don't know what your first sequence with her was, but my first sequence was very tense because we were my first sequence with her was I caught a bus, I think, or I hitchhiked. No, I caught a bus, and we were in the bus, and she was in there because her car broke down, and but she was like trying to detain a kid. And so it's like I was in the back seat and like she and the kid were in the front seat, and then there was like the driver and her husband. And it was a very tense thing because like she was trying to like arrest this kid, and like there's these other circumstances that like you learn about as you progress with her character as to like what's going on with her and her life and her relationship with other characters that explain why she was so aggro, like that in that first meeting with her, for me at least. So at first I didn't really know because like I was also like, I didn't side with her in that interaction. I sided with the kid because the people driving the bus were also like, don't you know, like they send kids to work camps and like blah, 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 like trying to convince her not to arrest him. So I was like, well, I'll also do that because it's like 4 against 1. And
4v1?
it ended up being like a tense situation. I was like, I don't know if I like that character as much, but then she just ends up again being like a very like sympathetic, like loving character, like motherly character who I also really fell in love with. So
Are we shipping John and Fanny?
yeah. Well, I mean, the game does. It's canon in the game.
That's true. My first.
We're just giving away so many spoilers.
We are.
Sorry, everybody.
But I think for Fanny, the first episode, she's my second favorite character too. Like it's John and then Fanny. My first interaction with her was I was pumping gas for this gas man, and for money, because he was going to turn me in unless I
see. It's funny.
gas.
I got that sequence way later. I got that in like episode 5.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And then she came, and then she was the cop, and like she was like, well, "What are you doing here? How old are you? Are you trying to cross the border?"
I'm working.
And you're like, "I'm just pumping."
I'm pumping.
Pumping iron. Throws the weed at her. Keep that, coppa. But yeah, so it was very tense in another way. So, but I knew that she had a good heart because she let me go.
Right.
She was like, I'm not gonna arrest you. And then you're like, what? You're not gonna arrest me? So she was like, and then I was like, okay, there's something there that like she has a job to do,
Right.
but she also has a heart, and she's conflicted.
Yeah.
So.
See, it's interesting because I didn't learn that quality about her until later. Because my first interaction was very much like, oh, like she wants to arrest this kid.
Yeah. She wants to arrest that kid, so she wants to arrest me.
Yeah, so.
Me too.
But yeah, I love her.
Yeah.
But that was it. I mean, just overall, I really enjoyed it. I may go back and try to get the stuff I'm missing. I might not. Stay tuned to find out.
TBD. I think now is a good time to take a break for our listeners.
We need like easy listening music.
Yeah.
To put in here for like 2 minutes.
Yeah, we do. We could technically just edit this part out and then.
Or just not. I
not.
just keep this all in.
Yeah. But I do think it'd be a good time to take a break. Let it absorb. Let it absorb. And this is where the music will play.
It's absorbing.
Yes.
Okay, and we're back.
We're back.
We got one more topic for you guys today. I kind of alluded to this last week, so I just want to talk about it a little bit because I think it's really interesting, very insightful. I think also as like players of games. So, and this was I referenced an article last week written by Rebecca Valentine at IGN, which was an article about essentially game development and what I think it was just kind of centered around like giving light or shedding light on things about game development that is harder than people like players think it is.
Because you think as you're playing a game, it's like you walk through a door, you're walking just in general. Right. You think that they just plug in all these things in and it just magically happens this way. And if one thing happens, like we were talking about the UI issues with Road 96 and having difficulties with those kind of things. But the amount of hard work, teamwork, the amount of dedication and time that it takes just to have people do the most simplest things is astronomical. You know, you have to have all these equations in your head. And like the article you're about to talk about and like get back into, it's like, it really like opened my eyes as a gamer because I'm like, I've been complaining all this time about things that I had no idea how they were done. And also this article is very illuminating and goes into each topic and kind of tells you like, this is actually what it takes to do this.
Right.
So I thought it was really cool.
Yeah. And like it's a very long article. I'm going to put it in the YouTube description so that if you guys are watching, you can go and you can actually read over it yourself. I highly recommend it. It's very, 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 very just eye-opening, like Mary said. Also, just like props to Rebecca for writing this article. Like the amount of research I think that went into making it, like and all of the interviews that she had to conduct. Like I think it's really awesome. So thank you, Rebecca, because I know you're listening.
Thanks, Bex. It's a celebration of gaming in a little way.
So my general takeaways from it. So I think just overall, like kind of like the title of the article says, it's titled, "Turns out the hardest part of making a game is everything." Nothing is as simple as you think it is. And one of the things that like I was kind of discussing with Mary a couple days ago when we were putting the show notes together was like, I think like especially in photorealistic games, and this is not saying that this isn't true of like, you know, games that are animated in other styles, but like when you are working, like let's say you have people who are meant to be human, you know, I think that you don't really realize the motions that your body makes as a person because you just do them. But you have to think like when you're designing a game, and this is like just for designing characters, right? Like you have to be hypercritical of things like motion, right? Like I talk with my hands a lot, right? Like I'm not thinking about this, but like if an animator were to be doing this, okay, well, like you have to make sure you have the joints, you know, how does your arm move when you like, am I pulling my shoulder up when I move my arm up? How am I bending my elbow? What am I doing with my hand? Do I have a fist? Is my hand open? What am I doing with my thumbs and fingers? You have to think about all of that and you have to animate it. One of the things the article talks about too is like even holding items. You know, they mention a lot of times when you are playing a game, you don't actually see an item being handed off. Or like being moved. And the reason for that is like anytime you pick up an item, an animator also has to, okay, well, what am I holding? You know, I think they use fruit as an example. It's like, what if it's an apple? What if it's a grapefruit? What if it's something bigger, smaller, longer, taller? Like all of that stuff you have to look at, okay, how does a hand close around an apple? Now, what about an orange? What if the hand is bigger? What if the hand is smaller? You know, and all of that stuff is time and money, right? That has to be put into designing just something as minimal as that. You know, so then you have to consider the larger picture, right? Like you have to do that for everything pretty much.
Yeah, and it's like it's building upon instinct. It's like us as humans, we have instincts to do all these things.
Right.
You know, like you were talking about, like how your fingers move, how you talk with your hands, all those kind of things, those motions that we make. So they have to think about every possibility that a human can do and program it into a system, into a machinery, you know, and taking human instinct into that. And I think as gamers, since it just is like, we don't even have to think about it. We expect that from games.
Right.
We expect like it just to run smoothly and for it just to be natural.
Because you notice it when it doesn't.
Yes, because it's unnatural. But the thing is, a game is unnatural. Like it's not built to be completely 100% natural, or else it would not be a game, and then it would just be us living our human lives. So I think trying to build that landscape, not only narratively, but also like systematically is just so difficult. And I think that's why people would get frustrated. You know, I would get frustrated. I'd be like, why when you put an item into your rucksack, it's just like you put it, like a person couldn't handle that much stuff. Like they don't have a backpack on. Like how are they just putting this sword into their pocket and being like, this is mine now? Like I would expect you to have to like, and then I was like, but I don't want this to be Death Stranding where you're carrying around like a big like rucksack, like a tower, like high. That's how it would have to be. Right. So I would get frustrated at things that I wouldn't really understand. And I'd want hyper realistic like things to happen. But a lot of times there's a lot of work that goes behind it that makes it almost, it's not impossible because people do it.
Right.
Developers do it, which is great and fantastic. And they're really good at it. But it's also, it just takes so much more than you think.
And like if you do make it realistic, you then have to have a minimal carrying capacity. Like think about like Last of Us, right? Or, you know, games like that where it's like you do literally carry everything that you have and you can see it. Like when you have multiple guns and you have, you know, whatever, you can actually see them on the characters' backs. If you have like a hammer or some sort of like two-handed weapon. But then you think about, like, I think about how minimal amount of stuff you're able to actually carry in that game. Well, it makes sense because all you have is a backpack.
Yeah.
And Naughty Dog wants, I think, strives to make realistic, games that fall into like realism.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's like that's what happens, right?
Yeah, and it's like, how much ammo did you use? How much ammo do you have left? Like, what did you leave behind? What weapon did you choose to switch out of? Like, that's all questions that like developers have to ask themselves, and they have to plan around people making those decisions.
Right.
And you're talking about millions of people playing this game in the ways that they want to make, like, play the game, make the decisions, make choices, and maybe they don't actually even use this gun. Maybe they don't even pick it up. Maybe it doesn't even exist in their gameplay, in their playthrough. Like there's certain guns that I didn't pick up. I didn't want to use.
Oh yeah, there's like with Last of Us, or like most recently playing like Resident Evil Village. Like there's guns that I never used, and I'm like, some developers like crying somewhere because I'm like, ew, fuck that gun, and they're like, I put
so many hours
into just making that gun, and then an animator had to figure out animations for how to holster the gun, how to pull it out, how to, what do you do when you actually point the gun and you're aiming?
Yeah.
How big is the reticle? Is it huge? Is it small? Like all that kind of stuff, like you have to think about when you're designing a game, and like kind of like you were just alluding to, also character, but player choice. I as a player will do whatever the hell I want, right? And so developers have to plan around that and be like, well, what if he doesn't go do this? How do we make it clear that we want him to do this? That's why you have like things like lighting cues. You have the yellow tape, in like Resident Evil and stuff like that. And stuff that's meant to guide you, because people get lost because you make these games that are realistic, but then it's like, well, how do we also make sure that we're holding people's hand a little bit, so it's clear what they can do next if they so choose. Yeah. And I have like another one, and this was probably the most topical for me because I know I have thought this, I know other people have thought this, and it's, we'll just add jumping. And it's so funny now because like before, reading this article, and before like, years ago when I didn't know anything about game development, I was like, why wouldn't you just like, because I've played games where there's no jumping feature where you've wished there were, And you're like, just add jumping. How hard can it be?
You go in and like you're walking around as the main character and you like hit the X button or you like try to jump and you're like, oh, this is a no jumping kind of game. Yeah. And you're like, oh.
So I pulled a quote from the article, and this is from Johanman Nordingen. I'm so sorry. I chose like the one with like the hardest name for me to read. And he is a dev at Dimbulb Games. And he said, something I've spent many hours on is player input. It seems simple. You press spacebar, you jump, but then you start to fall into all the special cases. What if a player is crouching? What if you want the spacebar to also activate items that the player is standing near? What about players using controllers instead of a keyboard? What about letting players remap their control scheme? What happens when the game is paused or in a menu? What if, God help you, there's a networked game and you have to send that to a server? It turns it into a system that requires multiple layers of abstraction to be able to handle all the possible things that might happen in a game when a player wants to jump or press the spacebar. And I think that just perfectly sums up kind of what we talked about is like you have to plan for all these possibilities. And I would imagine too, if you have a game that doesn't have jumping, right? And it's like, well, just add jump. It's like, okay, well, you have all those animations that are kind of alluded to in the article you have to consider. Like if you're crouching, you're just standing. What is the dynamic of the jump? Do you have a half jump depending on how much you press the button? Do you have a full jump? Is there a double jump, a high jump? Okay, so you add a jump feature. Well, now you have these environments. Okay, now you have to change all of the environments you've designed to accommodate jumping because you have to limit the character. You have to make certain places accessible by jumping. You have to change the cues to be like, hey, you have to jump here. It's like there's all this stuff, and I think people don't really realize like all of those microscopic things that go into actually making something that's playable, that's fun, and that's realistic, if realism is what you're going for.
Yeah, and there's also, you were talking about jumping and like how you prefer to jump in a game. I love to b-hop. And I don't know if anyone loves to b-hop.
Yeah.
Because I play like Counter-Strike, like, Go, and b-hopping is actually like a thing that they do like for strategic value. Right. I just like to b-hop in games where I just love to like
just jump
fuck around. Yeah.
Or like Kingdom Hearts dodge roll.
Oh yeah,
everywhere.
Like, everywhere, because I feel like in my brain it's faster. It might not be faster.
Probably not, but
to do that.
It's just more fun.
But it's just more fun. I like to interact in every single possible way I can at every single moment in a game. So that's why I b-hop. So there was actually, I forget what game it was. I'm trying to blank on it right now, but I was b-hopping so much that the game actually started like stalling on me, like glitching out a bit because I kept b-hopping and like that's what I was doing. And like also when I think about the limitations, it's actually gotten a lot better because Ratchet and Clank, for example, for the PS5, like I'm b-hopping everywhere, but it doesn't, there's no delay, there's no stall, there's no glitching, there's no anything because I think the game actually wants you to be as fast as you can. Like it's about speed. It's about, doing those kind of things. So they probably developed it to be able to handle you doing all kinds of motions, all kinds of things at the same time. Because that's what the game's all about.
Right.
So I think earlier games when I would b-hop everywhere, it was a little bit of a problem.
Yeah.
But I think I was the one being chaotic first off. I was the one that was like trying to do that and pushing it to its limits. But
well, that's like I'm thinking about too, like in Kingdom Hearts, how you have Kingdom Hearts 2 specifically, you have so many different, like you can progress the game, and as you level up your drives, you get permanent perks. Like you can you can get dodge roll in Final Mix, not in the original, but you can get like dodge roll, you get glide, you get high jump, you get the aerial dodge.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I mean, again, played those games as a kid and I still love them. So it's like, I would have never thought, I just was always like, oh, these are cool. But I like have so much more appreciation for the devs. And like, again, I mean, like they're a AAA studio, but like whatever, like it's still a lot of work to have all those animations. And then again, like how does that, I imagine like there's also, how does that interact with the environment? Like the environments have to be designed in that game so that you can glide around, so that you can jump really high, so that
at any given time.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of work. You got to put in hours of research of like, I think it's also really important for game testers. I think that's why they use game testers is like to see how they play the game, like how they choose to do the movements, how they decide to move around in the world. So they could be like, oh, like our game can't handle this, or our game can handle this, or like change it around and make sure that that's being done. And they keep having to have game testers test it out repeatedly every day, like every iteration of every change that they make, so that they are prepared for it. And that just puts a lot of time, dedication, and I can't even imagine how many hours of work that takes to like do one simple thing. Yeah. Like, we were saying before, it's like dodge roll. It's like, how long did that take?
Somebody spent probably days, maybe weeks, figuring that out, and then they had to put it into the game itself. Like an animator had to make it isolated, and then it had to be put into the game. Yeah. Then you have, a texture artist had to texture the movement, the clothing and whatever. There's like all this stuff. It's really fascinating, and I could talk about it forever, but I won't.
Yeah.
I will put the article in the description because there are tons and tons and tons. There's probably maybe like 10, 12 more examples of just other things like problems with elevators, how doors are the hardest thing to put in games.
Yeah, and it, like reading the article made me really reflect on myself and my behavior towards playing games. And, like, the fact that I can be frustrated by something, but that just means that I don't understand it.
Exactly.
And like I think leading on, like from reading this article and from like looking at those interviews and people talking about it, it's introduced a new type of mentality for me where if something happens and it's not cyberpunk, like cyberpunk is different because they advertised it as working functionally and they released it when it wasn't. So that was a little different. But any game that comes up like that I play and it has like little minor problems or issues or like glitches or something like that, I can understand it better and be like, okay, be more forgiving because, maybe there's a patch, maybe they're working on it, maybe they know about it. Like it's not something that's just like, well, it should be this way.
Right.
Like, it's something
where they don't care. It's sloppy work.
Yeah.
If anything, this helped deepen my already deep gratitude towards devs. Because it is just like for every single dev of every occupation, a shit ton of work to make it work. So, I'll put the article in the description. It's awesome. Please read it. It's very insightful, very funny too. There's sort of a levity to it, because it's just like, because you think like, oh my God, how hard is it to put a door in a game? Really hard, apparently. So, but that's it for today. We have talked a lot, and we'll be back next week, probably in a different location. Yeah, maybe in a completely different location. Thank you for listening. We appreciate you and your interest in our podcast. Yeah. Dun 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 dun. Bye 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 bye.